There are moments in life that do not break you loudly. They break you quietly, not through loss, not through rejection, but through exhaustion, the kind that settles deep in your chest after trying and trying and trying and trying again to force something to work that never fully opened for you in the first place. And maybe that is why this message found you now, because part of you already knows. The door you keep standing in front of, the one you keep knocking on with bleeding hands, the one you keep praying over, crying over, returning to, is beginning to close. Not because you are unworthy, not because you are unworthy, not because you failed, but because some doors only stay open long enough to teach you how attached you became to walking through them. You felt it recently, didn't you? That strange resistance, the delays that made no sense, the silence, the emotional heaviness, the way things suddenly became harder than they needed to be, almost as if life itself stopped cooperating. And what hurts the most is this: you gave that door meaning. You convinced yourself that if it opened, everything inside you would finally settle. The loneliness, the confusion, the waiting, the fear that your life is however behind everyone else's. So you kept pushing, even after the signs changed, even after your peace disappeared, even after your intuition whispered, "This is costing you too much." Because human beings do something heartbreaking when they are emotionally attached. They stop asking whether something is meant for them and start asking how much pain they can tolerate to keep it alive. That is why some people stay in relationships that slowly erase them. Why some chase dreams that no longer feel aligned with who they are becoming. Why some beg for opportunities that only feed their ego while starving their soul. And maybe nobody told you this before, but not every closed door is punishment. Sometimes it is protection arriving in a form your emotions do not immediately recognize. Because if that door had opened when you wanted it to, you might have entered something your spirit was never designed to survive. That is the part people rarely talk about. We mourn the things we almost had without realizing how many unseen disasters we were quietly spared from. There are conversations you never heard, truths you were never shown, intentions hidden beneath smiles, consequences hidden beneath desires. And still, you kept forcing it, because emotionally it became more than a door. It became proof. Proof that you mattered. Proof that your prayers worked. Proof that your waiting meant something. But when a person ties their identity to one outcome, they begin to lose themselves every time life says no. And slowly, without noticing, they stop living. They only wait. Maybe that is where you are right now. Existing between hope and exhaustion, still checking for signs, still replaying old moments in your head, still wondering if one more effort, one more prayer, one more attempt could finally change everything. But deep down, something feels different now. You are tired in a way sleep cannot fix, because soul exhaustion is not physical. It happens when your heart keeps fighting battles your spirit already surrendered. And the strange thing is, sometimes the hardest part of healing is not losing the thing itself. It is losing the version of yourself that believed that thing would save you. That realization changes people, quietly. You start understanding why certain paths kept collapsing no matter how hard you tried to rebuild them. Every time you thought things were finally moving forward, something unexpected pulled it apart again. At first it felt cruel, personal, like life was targeting the exact thing you cared about most. But now, maybe you are beginning to see something deeper. Maybe what felt like rejection was actually redirection, repeated so many times that eventually your soul could no longer ignore it. Because when something is truly aligned with your peace, it does not require you to abandon yourself to keep it. Read that again in your heart. When something is truly aligned with your peace, you do not have to destroy your mental health to hold on to it. You do not have to beg endlessly. You do not have to chase constantly. You do not have to become anxious every single day, wondering where you stand. And yes, meaningful things require effort. But there is a difference between effort and emotional warfare. Some doors drain the life out of you because they were never meant to become your home, only your lesson. And lessons rarely feel gentle while you are inside them. That is why people cling harder when they sense a door closing. They panic because closure feels like death to T version of them that built their future around it. So they push harder. They overthink more. They obsess more. They pray louder. They become emotionally louder because internally they are terrified of silence. But silence reveals truth. And truth is uncomfortable when attachment has been speaking for your heart. You know what is strange? Sometimes God closes a door not when you fail, but when you finally become ready for something your old attachment would have prevented you from receiving. Think about that. What if the closed door is not evidence that your life is falling apart? What if it is evidence that your life is finally being rerouted towards something that does not require suffering to feel valuable? Because pain can become addictive, especially when you have spent years believing love must be earned through struggle, that opportunities must be chased until you collapse, that blessings only count if they arrive after emotional torment. But peace is not supposed to feel unfamiliar, and yet for many people, it does. Chaos became home, so when calmness appears, they distrust it. When ease appears, they sabotage it. When healthier paths appear, they overload. Okay then, because they do not create the same emotional intensity as the doors they became addicted to forcing open. Maybe that is why this season feels confusing. Part of you still wants the old door to open, but another part of you, a quieter part, is beginning to crave peace more than validation. And that changes everything, because once your soul gets tired enough, your priorities shift. You stop wanting constant signs. You stop wanting emotional games. You stop wanting to prove yourself worthy of spaces where your spirit constantly feels unwelcome. You begin wanting something softer, something honest, something that does not require you to abandon your inner peace just to keep it alive. But before that new chapter arrives, there is usually a painful transition, a space where the old door is closing, but the new one has not appeared yet. That in-between season is where many people lose themselves, because uncertainty exposes what we truly trust. And most people do not fear closed doors. They fear empty hallways, the waiting, the unknown, the feeling that nothing is happening while everything inside them is changing. But transformation is often invisible before. It becomes undeniable. Seeds break underground long before anyone sees flowers. And maybe that is what is happening to you right now. Maybe life feels quieter because something deeper is being rebuilt beneath the surface. Not your circumstances, your standards, your discernment, your emotional patterns, your understanding of what truly belongs in your life. Because there are things you once prayed for that your future self would never settle for now. You just could not see it yet. And honestly, that realization can hurt. It hurts to admit you fought for things that were slowly hurting you. It hurts to admit you ignored your intuition because your emotions were louder. It hurts to realize that sometimes you confused attachment with destiny. But awareness is where freedom begins, not perfection, awareness. The moment you finally stop romanticizing the closed door and start asking yourself why you were willing to suffer so much just to keep it open, that question changes lives. Because sometimes the real issue was never the door. It was the emptiness inside you that believed losing it meant losing yourself. And once you begin healing that emptiness, something, e.g., unexpected happens. You stop chasing, not because you no longer care, but because desperation leaves your spirit. You begin understanding that what is truly meant for you will not constantly require you to betray your peace to receive it. You start noticing how much energy you wasted trying to force alignment where there was only attachment. And slowly, your grip loosens, not all at once. Healing rarely works that way. Some nights you still miss what you almost had. Some mornings you still wonder what could have happened if things went differently. Some part of you still looks back. That is human. But now there is also another feeling growing beside the grief, relief, quiet relief. The kind that arrives slowly after emotional storms finally stop controlling your nervous system. You begin waking up without obsessing as much. You begin breathing deeper, laughing naturally again, feeling moments of peace without immediately waiting for them to disappear. And that is when you realize something important. The closed door was not only blocking your future, it was blocking your ability to fully meet yourself. Because as long as you kept forcing your way into space that drained you, you had no energy left to discover who you were outside the struggle. Some people spend years attached to doors simply because they fear what life might become without the chase. But there is an entire version of you waiting on the other side of surrender. A calmer version, a wiser version, a version that no longer confuses chaos with purpose. And maybe surrender is the word your soul has been resisting most. Because surrender sounds like defeat when you are emotionally attached. But spiritually, surrender often means trust. Trust that what leaves your life is not always being stolen from you. Sometimes it is being removed because your future cannot carry it. That does not mean the loss feels easy. Even necessary endings can hurt deeply. Even closed doors can echo in your heart long after they shut. But pain and purpose can exist together. And one day you may look back at this exact season and realize the closed door was the beginning of your healing, not the end of your story. You know what many people never admit? Sometimes they do not actually want the thing anymore. They only want the emotional certainty they imagined it would give them. There is a difference. And once you recognize that difference, you start seeing your life differently. You realize you were not begging for a relationship. You were begging to feel chosen. You were not obsessed with the opportunity itself. You were obsessed with what achieving it would finally prove about you. You were not afraid of the closed door. You were afraid that without it, your life would feel directionless, but your worth was never inside that door. And maybe that sentence alone is what your heart needed to hear. Because somewhere along the way, you started measuring your value through outcomes, through responses, through acceptance, through things working out exactly the way you hoped. And when they did not, you internalized the silence. You questioned yourself, your future, your faith, your identity. But closed doors are not always reflections of your worth. Sometimes they are reflections of timing, alignment, growth, protection, redirection. And sometimes they close because your soul has outgrown what your emotions still crave. That is one of the hardest truths to accept. Your soul and your attachment are not always asking for the same thing. Your Ada, Shment asks for familiarity. Your soul asks for truth. Your attachment wants immediate relief. Your soul wants lasting peace. And the conflict between those two things can create seasons of intense confusion, especially when you are trying to heal while still emotionally attached to what hurt you. But eventually, clarity arrives, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, like waking up one morning and realizing you no longer want to fight for what once consumed you. Like noticing that your heart no longer races when you think about the thing you once believed you could not live without. Like understanding that peace feels more valuable now than emotional intensity. That is growth. Not the loud, kind people post online. The private kind, the sacred kind. The kind that happens internally when a person finally stops chasing doors that were never opening naturally. And maybe that is why your life has felt emotionally strange lately. Because part of you is grieving, but another part of you is grieving, but another part of you is finally waking up. Waking up to how much energy you spent trying to earn what was never freely flowing toward you. Waking up to the patterns, the emotional exhaustion, the waiting for things to change. Waking up to the fact that forcing is not the same as building. And once that awareness enters your spirit, it becomes impossible to ignore. You start noticing how often your body warned you before your mind accepted reality. How anxiety kept increasing around the very thing you kept trying to save. How your peace disappeared every time you got close to that door again. Your body knows. Your spirit knows. Even when your attachment refuses to accept it. And maybe that is why the door keeps closing. Not because life is against you, but because something inside you deserves better than surviving on crumbs while calling it destiny. You deserve spaces where your nervous system can rest, where you do not constantly question your value, where your spirit does not feel like it is begging to be received. And no, That does not mean life becomes perfect. But there is a difference between healthy challenge and soul-level depletion. Some doors require you to become smaller just to fit through them. Smaller emotionally, smaller spiritually, smaller mentally, and eventually your soul gets tired of shrinking itself for places that were never destined to hold your full self. That is when the closing begins. Slowly at first, then all at once. And people often call it loss, when really it is release. A painful release, yes, but release nonetheless. Because if you kept forcing that same door forever, one day you would wake up realizing you spent your entire life trying to convince one path to validate your existence. And that is too heavy a burden for any door to carry. No relationship can save you from yourself. No opportunity can permanently heal insecurity. No external outcome can replace inner peace. That is why some prayers are answered through removal instead of arrival. And maybe this message is not here to convince you that losing the door will feel easy. Maybe it is here to remind you that your life is bigger than the thing you are afraid to release. Bigger than the thing you are afraid to release. Bigger than the relationship. Bigger than the failed timing. Bigger than the silence. Bigger than the unanswered questions. You are still becoming. Even here. Even now. Especially now. Because some of the deepest transformations happen in seasons where nothing external seems to be moving. When you are forced to sit with yourself, to face your past, turns, your fears, your attachments, your need for control. And slowly, through that discomfort, something inside you softens. You stop demanding certainty from life. You stop trying to force every outcome. You begin listening instead of chasing, trusting instead of gripping, breathing instead of panicking. And strangely, that is often when new doors begin appearing. Not because you finally suffered enough, but because your energy changed. You stopped approaching life from desperation. You stopped trying to force alignment. You stopped worshiping doors that were already closing. And maybe the most beautiful part of all this is what comes after. The moment you realize the closed door did not destroy you, it revealed you, your strength, your resilience, your capacity to heal, your ability to survive endings you once thought would break you forever. One day you will look back and see how this season reshaped your spirit in ways comfort never could. How it taught you discernment, how it taught you self-respect, how it taught you that peace is not something you should have to sacrifice in order to feel loved, chosen, or worthy. And maybe for the first time in a long, time, you will stop asking why the door closed, because you will finally understand why it had to. Not every ending is destruction. Some endings are invitations. Invitations to become someone no longer willing to beg life for what drains them. Invitations to trust that what truly belongs in your life will not require endless suffering to remain there. Invitations to finally loosen your grip and let your soul breathe again. So if you have been feeling the shift lately, the distance, the resistance, the exhaustion of trying to force what once felt so important, maybe this is not abandonment. Maybe this is not abandonment. Maybe this is mercy wearing unfamiliar clothes. Maybe life is not taking something from you. Maybe it is returning you to yourself. And perhaps the reason this hurts so deeply is because part of you already knows the truth. The door is closing, not to punish you, not to shame you, not because you are forgotten, but because your future cannot fully open while your hands are still clinging to what your spirit has already outgrown. And the beautiful thing is, you do not have to force open what is truly meant for you. You never did.